What is up? Good morning and welcome to Mock It Like It's Hot, Club Fantasy's weekly mock draft show. And if you followed along at all, you know today looks very different. I'm all by myself. Nobody wanted to play with me today. It is what it is. But in all seriousness, work and family always comes first here at Club Fantasy. And our guest this week was actually a good friend of my co-host, Evan. We thought it best if when she came on the show, Evan was actually present. So again, it's me flying solo, but that's not going to stop me from mock drafting. Every week we get together and do this show. And I chose this week, since I get to make all the rules, it's going to be another rookie mock. And I went 10-team SuperFlex so we could compare to the draft we did just 2 weeks ago, 10-team SuperFlex, but pre-landing spots. So at the end of the show, I'm going to actually try to compare those two drafts as we take a look. Wonderful group of drafters we have with us. The draft didn't fill up. I'm about to go live on the draft, but it did not fill up today. So we're going to have 2 auto draft spots. But all in all, one of the best group of drafters we've ever seen. Kevin Coleman, Britt Flynn, a bunch of people I'm not mentioning right now that are also great. Bunch of guests of this show. So I thank each and every one of you for joining. I'm going to go ahead and put the draft up on the big screen with this fancy little picture-in-picture view. And then I'm going to jump over to Sleeper and click Start Draft. So our buddy Kevin has the first pick. I'm going to guess it's not a quarterback, but Kevin is far smarter in Dynasty than I am. I believe the 101. This is one of the biggest debates in fantasy football right now. Normally in SuperFlex drafts, it's all about the quarterbacks, and that is not currently the situation with how poorly these quarterbacks were drafted. And so that's what we're looking at a SuperFlex rookie draft is who's going to go 101, but way more importantly, where are the 4 quarterbacks going to fall? And I say 4 because we had Kenny Pickett in round 1, and then we had 3 quarterbacks taken in round 3, all in close succession to one another. And where are those guys going to fall? And that's what's great about doing mock drafts is you get to kind of see what's going to happen before it happens. And obviously things can change as we get closer, but a lot of rookie mocks are happening right now, and you need to know this information. I was helping a follower yesterday where he was on the clock with the 102. Breese Hall went 101, and he needed to know, should you go quarterback? Spoiler alert, I told him no, I didn't think it was that high. Unfortunately, Kevin probably did not get the notification that the draft had started. Sleeper's having some issues today. That could also be why we didn't fill up. But what do you know? Our guy Joel, who I did a show with this past Saturday, stuck to his word and takes a quarterback at 102. So we have Breese Hall at the 101, Malik Willis at the 102, and there's a lot of debate around that too, but Willis didn't go to the 3rd round. Obviously, a really nice landing spot with Tennessee. He gets to pair with Treylon Burks right out of the gate. It's just going to be interesting because Ryan Tannehill is technically still under contract for 2023, but they can get out of that contract relatively easy next year. So this year, you're not going to see a lot of Malik Willis, but next year he could be a starter, and Joel takes him at the 102. We had our boy Nick Martinez, who has been a guest on this show, fantastic dynasty player. He went ahead and stuck with the running back trend and went Kenneth Walker at the 103. Walker landed in Seattle. I kind of skipped over Breese Hall here. Breese Hall has been my dynasty 102, SuperFlex at this point, 101 in non-SuperFlex leagues. He has been my 101, 102 for a while now. He ended up with the New York Jets. Breaks my heart for my guy, Michael Carter, but Breese Hall is the truth. That's a job that he's going to win over easily. I think we're looking at 200 carries, probably 50 targets, 250 opportunities in a rookie year. The Jets are a team that want to run the football, and they're a good team at running the football. So it's going to be real interesting to see how quickly they can get Breese Hall involved. I don't know if this is serendipitous, but Britt Flynn with Treylon Burks, her guy at 104. Maybe she set up a draft queue knowing that she was going to time out, but she got her guy regardless. Even if it was an auto draft, Britt is going to be very happy when she comes back. Faith takes Chris Olave at the 105. And so the draft right now is shaking out very similarly to what we would see in a normal, or not a normal SuperFlex, let's be clear, way more quarterbacks would go, but in SuperFlexes that took place before we had landing spots, the quarterbacks just weren't that appetizing, so they tend to fall to the end of this round. Malik Willis was always the higher guy, but Malik Willis was my 101, and in most drafts, in the draft I'm going to show you at the end of the show, he was the 101. He fell to the 102 spot. And this is, like I said, what we're sorting out in rookie drafts right now. The wide receivers landed just in wonderful landing spots. I'm going to kind of go over that. Garrett Wilson with the Jets, Drake London in Atlanta, Jamison Williams in Detroit, Chris Olave in New Orleans, Treylon Burks in Tennessee, replacing A.J. Brown, who was traded to the Philadelphia Eagles, Jahan Dotson in Washington, and then even Skye Moore in the second round to Kansas City, Christian Watson to Green Bay. And I'm a big fan. You'll probably see him go earlier in this draft if it's up to me, to John Mechie to Houston. Wonderful landing spots for the wide receivers and wonderful draft capital. One of the more shocking things to me was the lack of draft capital in the third round to running back. So you had Breese Hall, Kenneth Walker, James Cook all go in the second, but then you had Rashad White, Tyrion Davis-Price, who a lot of people probably didn't even know about, and Brian Robinson go in the third round, and then it fell to the fourth round. The draft capital is just not there for these rookie running backs. I just noticed I'm up on the clock. I have my draft queue set up, so this is going to be very easy to me. This is set up with my rookie rankings, so I'm just going to be able to make my pick and move on. But let's take a quick look back at that first round. So as I mentioned, Breece Hall, Malik Willis, Kenneth Walker, Treylon Burks. Faith went Olave, Garrett Wilson, Drake London. Those wide receivers you're going to see go in roughly that order. I have Garrett Wilson as the higher ranked player. Auto draft took Kenny Pickett and Jamison Williams. It breaks my heart that the auto draft took Kenny Pickett because I want to know what is going to happen with these quarterbacks. In my own rankings, Pickett and Ritter are right there at the back end of the first round. Ritter was the best player available to me. I do have Pickett ahead of Ritter and Willis based on draft capital. They were players that Pickett was taken in the first round. The next guys weren't taken until the third round, and not even all that early in the third round. And so I think Pickett for fantasy is probably the better option because Pittsburgh plainly and simply has more invested in him. I love Desmond Ritter pre-draft. I got in all the fist fights I could, hyping up my guy Ritter. Now he lands with Drake London. He lands with Kyle Pitts. He lands with, I think it's Tyler Algier that's there as well, but that might not be the biggest thing there. He lands in an Arthur Smith offense that I believe in. I'm very happy with Desmond Ritter, especially if he doesn't have to play this year and can sit behind Marcus Mariota. I think it's going to be a great fit for him there. Pickett is likely to sit behind Mitch Trubisky, but Mitch Trubisky was probably the easiest quarterback to unseat of these like questionable quarterbacks. And the weapons in Pittsburgh, Chase Claypool, they added George Pickens in the draft. And then you also have Deontay Johnson, one of our favorite players, and Najee Harris there. That's a mission for success if you believe in Kenny Pickett. I just don't believe in Kenny Pickett. I actually prefer Malik Willis in the rushing upside. I like what he has in Tennessee. Obviously, I would have liked it a lot better if it's A.J. Brown, but Treylon Burks, while he's not the same player as A.J. Brown, is a good replacement player for A.J. Brown. So it's going to be exactly what we expected from Malik Willis, a rough first year where he needs time to develop. I just don't know if you want him developing behind Ryan Tannehill. It's not exactly who I would want my favorite player learning from, but that's not my decision to make. So now we reach me with the 210, and this is where I'm a little torn. I'm going to go by my draft board, and it's SuperFlex, and I know the rules. And the next guy on my draft board, I'm going to grab Matt Corral. So I'm doubling up on quarterbacks right off the rip because the cheapest you're ever going to land a quarterback in SuperFlex is at the drafts, either your startup draft or in the rookie drafts. Matt Corral lands in Carolina. Corral is going to be playing behind, Sam Darnold this year. He obviously needs some development, but Matt Corral was some people's quarterback 101 in this draft. And now he gets to play in Carolina, a team that has firepower, DJ Moore, Robbie Anderson, Christian McCaffrey, and only has to beat Sam Darnold for a job. And if you followed along for any period of time, Sam Darnold is a guy who you want to be able to beat for a job. That's really what it comes down to. Our buddy Josh in the chat pointing out that Joel is just dying on that hill for Willis, dying on that Willis sword. Joel did a show with us on Saturday for Club Dynasty where he stuck to his guns that Malik Willis is still the 102. And I don't necessarily have a problem with this. It's not what I would do. If it were my draft, I would go ahead and take my 101 is Breece Hall, my 102 is Garrett Wilson, and my 103 is Kenneth Walker. And then I'm looking Kenny Pickett. But you got to get your quarterback, especially in these rookie drafts, because instantly next week they cost more. Get them now while you can. If you're picking at the 102, you probably did not have a great team last season, and you need quarterback. It's all but assured that you need quarterback. But If you're willing to accept your team as a rebuild, you could also go wide receiver there. Wide receivers have that longevity. I'm pretty well good with taking Malik Willis at that point in the draft, as long as you know exactly what you're getting into. You may have set yourself back a year or two, depending on the makeup of your team. And we always talk about, team makeup plays a lot into everything you're doing here. But at the top of the draft, you want talent, and you have to get who's going to help your team. Now, I'm pretty ecstatic. I don't love the landing spot, but to have Isaiah Spiller, who was at one point in rookie drafts a first-round pick, fall all the way to me in the end of the third round. So in this draft so far, I've landed 2 quarterbacks. If one or both of these guys end up starters, I'm in a very good position moving forward. And then I land a running back who at one point was considered one of the more talented running backs of this class. He lands with the Los Angeles Chargers, so he's obviously behind Austin Eckler. But we've learned Austin Eckler is not a bell cow running back. There's going to be touches given there, and it's not going to Joshua Kelly. Justin Jackson isn't even there anymore, and I've completely lost the name of the guy who was there last year, but he's not very good. Isaiah Spiller could step in and get touches right away in a very, very good offense, one of my favorite offenses in the entire NFL. So just taking a look, Josh brought up that Jahan Dotson, who landed in Washington, was falling a little bit in the drafts, and we could be looking at a year to, he mentions Kadarius Toney, who had, 1 or 2 good games last year, but was just a bust for the most part. That's not a guy that you were happy to have. It's a guy who's sitting on a bunch of my practice squads, my taxi squads right now. And now there's a bunch of drama going on around him where you're not even sure if he's going to be a Giant. You're not sure how he's going to be used. The Giants had Wan'Dale Robinson, who can play kind of that Isaiah McKenzie role compared to what Brian Daboll had in Buffalo. So Toney is a very interesting prospect. That's not a comparison you want thrown out for Jahan Dotson. I like him far better than Toney, but landing him in the second round, it speaks a lot to what's going on there. That's a first round wide receiver that you landed in the second round. But there's a lot of different picks going on that I am missing. So we're just going to take a quick look at the draft board, and things are blowing through quickly here. James Cook, a second round running back, the third running back off the board, able to be landed as the third running back in our draft, but way in the middle of the second round by Nick Martinez. George Pickens, who was a very highly touted wide receiver coming in, falling to the late part of the second round, actually going 1 pick after Dotson. I think the issue you have with Pickens is he's playing behind Deontay Johnson, and he's playing behind Chase Claypool. Chase Claypool is not the most polished wide receiver, and while he's had some really big games in his first 2 years in the league, his job is far from secure, and I think Pickens could actually make a run at that job, and they have the draft capital invested in him. John Mechie, my guy, going with the auto pick. He pairs up with Pickett. The auto pick's actually not doing terrible here with Mechie, Robinson, and now Tyler Beatty out of Buffalo to go with Kenny Pickett. So again, auto picking, not my favorite thing in the world. So I'm going to grab a guy here that I find a very interesting prospect, especially with everything that's going on in San Francisco. Danny Gray coming out of SMU, I believe. Interesting guy because first and foremost, Joe Zolo, if you followed our show for any period of time, we are big on SMU wide receivers. And so with Danny Gray going to San Francisco having their issues right now with Deebo Samuel. Do you trust Brandon Ayuk? Right now, their third wide receiver is Jawan Jennings. Danny Gray is a guy who could go in there, and if he could play well, he could step in and be a third wide receiver, maybe even a second if Deebo Samuel gets dealt very early. And I was able to land him in the 4th round, and they spent the capital on him. That's, again, you're going to hear me talk about this a lot during this very short show. Draft capital matters. And when I do my rankings, I start with draft capital. And Danny Gray was one of the first wide receivers taken in the 3rd round of the draft. San Francisco made their investment in him. So it's going to be very interesting to see. Danny Gray was a guy who, I'm going to be perfectly honest with you, I don't know that he was being drafted in a 50-pick, 5-round, 10-team rookie draft earlier. Now he's moved up to the 4th round. So he's definitely moving up draft boards, but he's still a guy who you can get very cheap. So let's go ahead and get over here to my pick. And I'm going to stick with my board just like I said I was going to, and we'll talk more about my picks towards the end of the draft. At the end of the draft, I'm going to just kind of go round by round, see if there's any picks that surprised me. I'm going to go ahead and pick on Faith a little bit right away. Can I highlight her? Let's make sure I can do that. Taking her guy, I think it's Bailey Zapp. That's how great he is. I don't even know the man's name. Yeah, Bailey Zapp going to New England. Faith is a Patriots fan. Faith was wondering why they took a quarterback to begin with, and now she's adding him in the 3rd round of a rookie draft. Definitely not my favorite pick. I understand that in SuperFlex drafts, it's all about get your quarterback early and often. Bailey Zapp is a guy playing behind a second-year player in Mac Jones. I just don't see him seeing the field very much. And with the players that were available there, namely Trey McBride, Jalen Tolbert in Dallas, Brian Robinson, Tyrion Davis-Price, and obviously Isaiah Spiller is the one that sticks out to me very much so. So it looks like we finished the draft. First and foremost, thank you to those who have tuned in. Thank you to those who continue to draft with us. We will be back next week. I'm not ending the show yet. We will be back next week. We're probably going to jump into redraft a little bit next week. We are bringing on a special guest who is not a self-proclaimed fantasy analyst, fantasy expert. Her name is Caitlin, and she has won, I think, 3 championships in her first 4 years or something. I'm probably overblowing it, but it doesn't matter. She's awesome. She is going to be a great asset to the show because we're going to see how fantasy champions who aren't talking about fantasy football every single day handle mock drafts and how she uses them and the things that she does in the draft that kind of set her apart. It's going to be one of our better shows. Make sure you tune in next week. So just taking a quick look at round 1, Breese Hall as the 101, no surprise. Malik Willis as the 102, a slight surprise there just because the draft capital is not there. But Joel sticks to his guns. I would have preferred Kenny Pickett. It is what it is. But then you go, Kenneth Walker. Treylon Burks is interesting. I know Britt's a big Treylon Burks fan. He is not my rookie 101. To be honest, he's probably my rookie 105 at wide receiver. I love Olave. I love Garrett Wilson. Getting Garrett Wilson at 1.6 is a steal. Drake London, great pick by Chris. I wouldn't expect anything different. The auto draft took Pickett, which breaks my heart because that was the thing I wanted to know most. And then Jamison Williams, Desmond Ritter. No real surprises here. Everybody did what they should have did. Second round, no surprise out of me to see Kevin take Skye Moore, landing in Kansas City, a team that has questions at wide receiver. That's exactly what you want, is a rookie that has a chance to develop with one of the best quarterbacks in football. Speaking of which, the very next pick, Joel gets his guy at the 2-2, the 12th pick, which makes him a back-end first-round pick in a 12-team league. Christian Watson landing in Green Bay. Joel had talked about this a little bit on Saturday where he loves Christian Watson. He loves Green Bay. He loves the fit. But rookies in an Aaron Rodgers system, it could be a little iffy at least to start the season, but still, great pick there. James Cook, great pick. Third running back off the board. You're getting him in the second round. Not something you see every day. I don't know enough about Rashad White except for the fact that he is now on a team that has Leonard Fournette, but you're probably only going to see Fournette there for a year or two more. Gio Bernard played really well as a pass catcher. I think you could see a little bit of Rashad White worked in. I just don't know how long it's going to take. Same exact situation for Zamir White, the next pick in Las Vegas. Jahan Dotson playing opposite Terry McLaurin. You have to deal with Carson Wentz this year, but maybe you get to deal with a new quarterback in the future. That would obviously be the hope. Was drafted there. I don't know if he's the quarterback of the future. And then where am I at? Wide receivers here. Pickens to Pittsburgh, again, trapped on the depth chart. I love Mechie. If Mechie plays the slot, he is going to be one of the receivers I am targeting in every single draft this year. I just think he is a great fit in Houston, a team that's going to have to throw the ball a ton. I absolutely hate Wan'Dale Robinson. He belongs in the auto draft. I would not touch him in the first 2 rounds. I don't know what the Giants are doing. That's a gadget player. I do not care about draft capital that he was taken in the second round with Wan'Dale Robinson. I am staying far away. And then obviously I took Matt Corral. Those are your first 2 rounds. Everything from there gets pretty subjective. Guys you want to look for, David Bell. David Bell had a lot of hype coming into the draft. Lands in Cleveland. Cleveland has an interesting wide receiver situation. Deshaun Watson, obviously a huge upgrade. They've let go of Jarvis Landry. They've let go of Odell Beckham. They traded for Amari Cooper. Is Donovan Peoples-Jones the answer? Probably not. I don't even know that Rashard Higgins is there anymore, so this could be a great landing spot for David Bell. Damian Pearson, Houston. I believe he was the only running back drafted by the Houston Texans. Damian Pierce is competing with Marlon Mack, Rex Burkhead, Deontay Foreman, or not even Deontay Foreman, Royce Freeman, excuse me. There's not a lot of competition in Houston right now, and that could be a great opportunity for a rookie running back who you just landed in the 3rd round to start, maybe even right away. Marlon Mack is still coming off that Achilles injury, was healthy scratched by Indianapolis for the most of last year. So that's kind of the draft. You guys can see it up on the screen here. Tyler Algier in Atlanta is someone worth keeping an eye on. I personally am very scared about Trey McBride landing in Arizona. Rookie tight ends don't tend to perform well right away to begin with, and now he's stuck behind Zach Ertz. There's no guarantee Zach Ertz is done this year, next year, even the year after. Obviously, you're happy about the quarterback situation, but if he never sees the field, does it actually matter? So go ahead and take a fresh look at that. I am now going to switch my screen share, so you're going to see my big dome on screen for a second. And I am going to bring up the draft we did a few weeks ago, which I believe is this one. I can't tell because it's so small. It is. So as I mentioned, Malik Willis went at the 101 from Josh Hudson. Breese Hall at the 102 from Faith. All of this makes sense. I knew Kevin was a big Garrett Wilson guy. Kenneth Walker in the first round, Traylon Burks, Drake London, Jameson Williams, Christian Watson. Now, again, it's Joel. So do we trust it? Of course we do. Desmond Ritter at the 110 for the second draft in a row. So you're seeing that. Kenny Pickett. So even with landing spots, while the names changed a little bit, the players really did not. Olave obviously saw a huge boost up. Chris Olave was the first pick of the second round when we did this back then. And now he has moved all the way up to the fifth pick of the draft. He was the second wide receiver taken. So you see a big jump there. George Pickens is an interesting one because he basically fell 6 spots landing in Pittsburgh. Spiller, again, fell very, very far. Isaiah Spiller is an interesting case study if you are someone who monitors ADP. Isaiah Spiller was the third pick of the second round by Kevin Coleman, who is a dynasty god. I have no problem telling him that. He won't accept the praise. I was able to land him at the 310 this week, 30 spots. I don't think the Chargers are that bad of a landing spot. So that is a guy who you should keep your eye on heading into these drafts because that is a massive, massive change for Isaiah Spiller. Matt Corral, as I mentioned, fourth quarterback off the board, stayed the fourth quarterback off the board, but fell. Rashad White right about where he's supposed to be. Skye Moore is another guy who took a huge leap up. Skye Moore was the 7th pick of the round, moved up to the first pick of the round. Towards the back end, it's very interesting to me. I remember making a comment in this draft that a lot of tight ends went, and I don't think it should be that way. Windermere wasn't even drafted, and then Jelani Woods was one of the third round guys. Rucker was the back end of the fourth round, if I remember correctly. I don't even know if Isaiah Likely was drafted. So you have all these guys who didn't even get drafted who were taken in this first draft. We've joked about the late round tight end and how everybody wants to try to find the next best thing. I don't think the next best thing is in this draft. As I mentioned, I do not love the landing spot for Trey McBride. Greg Dulcich is going to be playing behind Albert O. Daniel Bellinger, who was taken in our most recent draft, is stuck under tight ends, and the Giants who brought in outside tight end help is what I'm basically trying to say. Jeremy Ruckert, who I believe was the third tight end drafted, is going to be stuck behind Uzama up there in the Jets. And I think they brought in another player too, whose name is not with me right now. But the long and short of it is, hey, Bailey Zapp basically went 2 rounds earlier because Faith has fully admitted that she was 5,000%, I think it was, not paying any attention whatsoever. So not the best pick there. All in all, not a ton of change, and I would have expected a lot more change, especially with Malik Willis going that high, Kenny Pickett going towards the middle of the round, and Desmond Ritter going at the 210. I was on record of saying I wasn't sure if these quarterbacks were going to go in the first 2 rounds, and now they are certainly back all the way up my draft board. And I think it makes sense. As I said earlier, and the common sense that was beaten into my head from smarter people I was talking to, the cheapest you're ever going to get a quarterback in Superflex is at the drafts. And it's either going to be your startup draft or it's going to be the rookie draft. So if you don't take them now, you're going to pay for them way worse later. I love the idea of taking flyers on guys like Bailey Zapp, Carson Strong, who was brought in on a undrafted free agent contract out in Philadelphia. I like taking flyers on those guys if I can get them in the last couple of rounds because they're just going to sit on your taxi squad. You're going to see what you have out of them later. But right now, they're not the players that you want to spend third round picks on. I'm like Isaiah Spiller falling to the end of the third round is robbery, and I'm glad I'm the one who walked away with him. So this was a fun draft. The whole point of this, and I will post this draft and the other draft one next to each other on the Twitter post that we do for these. But the whole point of this draft was seeing how much this past weekend's draft changed things. Obviously, there's still a ton of preseason left, and a lot of this could change. You're going to hear about players winning jobs. You're going to hear about undrafted free agents making a splash. James Robinson did it a couple years ago, and now we're all looking for who is the next James Robinson. I don't know that we're going to have one in this draft, but there are plenty of guys to keep an eye on. make sure you stay tuned to Club Fantasy. We're going to start having more Dynasty shows this upcoming Wednesday show with guests and hosts and everything kind of up in the air right now. Joe Zola will be there. I'll be there. It's all about landing spots. And we're not just going to talk about the first 4 rounds. We're not going to we'll probably only talk about the fantasy relevant positions, though Joe and I will sneak some IDP in there as well. So make sure you tune in Wednesday. You should probably just subscribe to our channel so you can see, when we're going live and when we're doing all of that stuff. We just dropped the Club Dynasty show where we talked about the SuperFlex 101. So if you want a little bit more context to go with this, go check that show out. It's up on our YouTube channel. Hit subscribe when you're there. We're working our way towards, I believe, 350, if not 400 subscribers. When we hit the next milestone, Josh is going to give away a jersey. I think it's a Keenan Allen jersey. So why wouldn't you want to win that? One of the best wide receivers in all of football. Check out our website. Our newest writer, Steve, just put out his 3 underrated running backs where he lists guys who are probably falling in your drafts right now if you're doing startup drafts or if you're preparing for redraft. These are guys who are able to be attained at a way lower cost than they should be. And that's it. You've just listened to me talk for 25 minutes straight, which is pretty much my favorite thing to do. Talk and then talk about fantasy football. Again, I thank you for tuning in. I thank you for drafting with me. This show will be back next week, hopefully with my co-host Evan back, so you just don't have to hear me ramble like a infomercial for 25 straight minutes. Thank you all. Have a wonderful day. See you next week.